Venture capital is more of an art than a science. It's a dream career getting to work with inspiring founders.
How did this transition happen from Uber to being a partner in venture capital firm?
Watching Uber grow from this tiny company, I joined when the company was less than 200 people. And by the time I left 4 years later, it was over 16,000.
If let's say a person has to give $1 million check to a venture capitalist versus $1 million check to a private equity, how much return on average can they expect?
Most startups will not succeed and not deliver great returns. We're in a world where there's abundant capital and not enough great ideas.
Roughly, we're going to be losing about 300 million jobs to AI perhaps in the next few years.
I am worried about the job replacement that is happening as we speak.
So how should a founder choose their VC? Vivian Cheng, thank you so much for joining us.
Amit, it's great to be on.
Vivian, I saw your beautiful journey, how you progressed from working in Uber to now currently being a partner in N47 venture firm. Tell us about this journey. How did this transition happen from Uber to being a partner in venture capital firm?
Yeah, happy to share. My journey is, I think, a pretty typical one. I actually moved up to San Francisco, during 2012. It was the epicenter of tech and the mobile era back then. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to be part of everything that was happening in Silicon Valley. So I was super lucky to have an early career at Uber where I started off on the finance team and transitioned into a product payments role. My journey at Uber was an incredible one. I joined when the company was less than 200 people. And by the time I left 4 years later, it was over 16,000. And I think it really shaped the narrative of my career and my trajectory in tech. I was surrounded by incredible, brilliant coworkers. I got to see the power of giving people leverage inside a startup and giving young people a lot of responsibility, and having that really shape how quickly and effectively a company could grow. I always joke I'll never see a trajectory like that again in my lifetime, because now with AI, you don't need 16,000 employees at a company. But nevertheless, it was an incredible experience where I learned so much. And the biggest lesson I would take away is sort of like the power of working with incredible people, the power of hiring young and hungry individuals to move a company forward, the power of a shared mission, and really just like the kind of impact you can have when a company gives you agency to do things. And so it was an incredible experience. I didn't actually have much thought to becoming a venture investor, but what happened was I was lucky enough to sell some of my Uber shares on the secondary market, in my third or fourth year of being there. And I knew that I wanted exposure to early tech. I'd seen the magic of watching Uber grow from this tiny company to something that was being used as a verb and a noun everywhere. And I knew that I wanted, my wealth concentration to be in technology. And so I actually redeployed that into other technology companies on the secondaries market. That was my first foray into understanding what investing looks like, and deployed it into a bunch of other great companies, buying up secondaries in Slack, Coinbase, Robinhood, Nutanix, you name it. There were so many that I was able to kind of spread those bets into, and was really lucky to kind of ride that wave. But in my investing journey, I started going earlier and earlier. I noticed a lot of my former coworkers were going off to start companies. I started getting involved on a direct basis and going earlier and earlier. And I was lucky enough to get connected to an early Uber angel, and that sort of began my first foray into joining that fund. And since then, have now been investing in venture for the last 8 years and absolutely love it. It's a dream career getting to work with inspiring founders and always learning about what's new in technology. And so, I think my hope in my career is to be able to recapture some of that Uber magic again in a company that I'm lucky enough to work with, partner with, invest in, and see that journey hopefully several times over. So that's a quick summary, but I think that transition from operating into investment into investing is actually incredible because I think having kind of seen that journey from in early time, just allows me to be a better venture investor. It allows me to see what great looks like. I think the experiences of operating and investing tie very neatly into one another.
Beautiful, beautiful, Vivian. This is a beautiful story, and you definitely were not just lucky. I'm sure you also worked very hard to be where you are today. Uh, Tell us in simple, plain English, what is the angel investor versus venture capitalist versus private equity, and how do LPs and GPs fit in?
Yeah. So I'll start off first with angel investors. That's probably what I was doing when I was a sole operator at Uber, investing in friends, companies, and people that I knew. Angel investor, I think, is really just a person investing their own capital. Maybe they've raised a small vehicle, but not doing it on any institutional scale. And typically, angel investors are investing at a company's earliest stages. So we're calling it like seed, pre-seed, et cetera. And it's usually one person having that check writing decision and making that investment. At my current fund, we love partnering with angel investors, seed funds. We're a little bit later down the stack, and so they're usually the first people to invest in what is sometimes called a friends and family round. But typically, these folks, and you're seeing a lot of these operator angels come out of these networks now from OpenAI, Anthropic. Back then, it was Uber, Palantir, et cetera. A lot of times, it's investing in their coworkers as they go out to start new things, but it's really happening at the earliest stages of a company and happening on a more individual basis. When you start looking at capital as more of a professionalized institution, this is when you start getting into venture capital investing. And so, obviously, that's the business I'm currently in. We are investing. Typically, we've raised money from what we call limited partners, and we deploy that capital. And our goal is to not only back the best people, but to make returns for our limited partners and the people who have believed in us. And limited partners can be a variety of folks from, you call endowments, family offices, schools, institutional capital, retirement funds. So there's a lot of ways LP money can come through. But again, these are the people that are giving venture capital firms money. And VC firms are then in charge of redeploying that capital across the tech ecosystem. You'll see venture capital firms of all flavors. Some are early stage, like seed and up. You're starting to see, obviously, multi-stage firms do everything from seed all the way to pre-IPO. We practice more traditional venture capital at N47. We're Series A to C, and so we're very stage focused, with a primary focus, honestly, on Series A and B. So the last group you mentioned, private equity, I think it's a similar group to venture capital. They raise money from limited partners, but they deploy capital on a different risk-adjusted basis. I will say VC, all about technology and embedding quite early. I do think private equity tends to focus on different industries and typically taking a much larger stake than VC firms do, and being much more active in the management of that investment. But typically a very different focus in business line in both ownership and stage focus and vertical focus.
Brilliant. Thank you for explaining it so clearly to our viewers here. Uh, if let's say a person has to give $1 million check to a venture capitalist versus $1 million check to a private equity, how much return on average can they expect in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, if you look historically at returns, venture capital is a lot more bifurcated, meaning you will see that a very small percentage of companies drive overall returns. And so folks, will typically, that's why, it's great to invest in a venture capital firm that is deploying capital across a wide range of companies. Most startups will never, will not succeed and not deliver great returns. I would say on average, and I'll speak more about VC. I'm not as familiar with the private equity industry and their benchmarks, but we typically are looking, for a fund to return at least 3x or higher on average. And that is because, out of a fund, the drivers of returns are just going to be a handful of companies. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very, very, outlier driven industry.
So three years return per year.
No, 3x for a fund overall in the fund's life cycle. And that should work out to about, 20% IRR or so. But it's 3x over the fund's life cycle. And a fund may take up to 7 to 10 years to return.
Hmm. Okay, so about in 7 years you get about 3x.
Yeah, that's right. And
Hmm.
that's probably best in class, honestly, at this time.
That's the best. That's the best in class because
On average.
because
Yeah.
yeah, you mentioned that we all know a very small set of companies succeed, and that's what VC is banking upon. What's the percentage of success for VCs in the US? Let's say specifically the California Bay Area. Uh, what percentage are succeeding? When you put, let's say, 100 companies, 5 companies succeed, 5 companies make you money, 95% don't make you money. What's the percentage here?
I don't have the exact split, but that sounds about right to me.
Okay, interesting. How do you choose a company? You focus on the founders more, or although your website clearly says product first, but what does product first mean? How important is product versus the founders?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Honestly, this is where venture capital is more of an art than a science.
Hmm.
Really, like everyone has such a different style when it comes to investing. There are certain firms that give more credence to metrics, to the team, to the product. It is a very personal style. I wouldn't even say it's like a firm-wide style. It's a very personal approach, and it's something that like you tune over your many, many years of being in the industry. Um, I will say that for N47, we typically very much focus on the product and the team. I would say those are like the two biggest things. We're not afraid to invest before commercial traction. Um, we're not afraid to invest. It's funny. We're a Series A to C firm, but we've invested in plenty of companies where they were pre-revenue or, just a few hundred K of ARR or just a handful of customers versus like a lot of firms maybe like, oh, the Series A benchmark is $1 million in ARR. We don't have such benchmarks. For us, it is very much on the product, the tech, and the team. I will say that my personal belief is that team is just utmost the most important thing. And this is very much learned from my time at Uber. It just takes so much for a startup to succeed that the person has to be truly like an outlier person. And so for me, I think the intensity, motivation, and desire of the founder to succeed and like how special this person is probably number one on my radar. Then number two is a product. I just think that, product is craftsmanship, it's taste. And I think in today's world, that matters more than ever, especially with how easy it is to use AI to build things. And thinking about a founder's product instincts as well as like where they can execute, like it's paired with execution and product taste. And so those are the two things that I personally spend the most time on.
Brilliant. Tell us, where do these valuations come from? I mean, sometimes it's a factor of ARR. Sometimes there's no ARR. It's like it's pre-revenue. Sometimes it's perhaps the legacy of the founder. Do valuations come from thin air?
Yeah, this is another one where it's more of an art than a science, especially at the early stage. I will say with growth stage companies, so we're talking like Series B and beyond, and there's a lot of commercial revenue. And we're not talking about like, foundation model labs. We're not talking about research moonshot projects, but like for typical software, I think there's a pretty established benchmark on how things are priced. I think obviously in a more competitive environment, you see less dilution, you see higher multiples, but at the growth stage, a lot of multiples is driven by comparable transactions that are happening in venture at the same time. And a lot of these metrics are quite widely known, but more often than not, they're also benchmarked to the public markets. We are at a historic run in the public markets right now. And so that is translating to very high valuations, on the private market side as well. So again, like best benchmarks are typically we infer from public, but truly it's an art and not a science at the early stages. So, at a Series A, the company may not have any revenue. And so you're just kind of backtracking into what you think this company could be worth, but also like the founder's desire for dilution, how much capital this company needs to survive and succeed, and kind of back into how much cash they need to get to that point, of which then they grow into their valuation. But I would say like Series A's can range anywhere from, on average, I've seen anywhere from like 50 to 200 million, and it's quite broad. And oftentimes it's a function of the negotiating power the founder has, and it really is more of an art rather than a science. Like how many term sheets they got, how big this market is, how fast they're growing. I mean, growth is a huge piece of it. If you're a company that is at a million of ARR, but you've only grown 2x year on year, you're not going to get a great valuation. Whereas if you're a company that has really defensible tech and product, and you got to a million in a month, like that's just going to command a very different multiple. And so it's really an art and not a science. But I would say on average, there's a typical dilution range and valuation range we're filtering through.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. That's a very beautiful piece of advice. How should founders dilute? Like at seed stage, is there a formula dilute X% in seed stage, Y% in Series A, X% in Series B? How should they be diluting?
Yeah, I think historically we were seeing founders dilute anywhere from like 10 to 20% per round. Now we're actually seeing dilution ranges become smaller and smaller. I think that founders have a lot of power now, and as they should. They have a lot of optionality. And the truth is, founders need less capital than ever to reach great outcomes. And so we're starting to see dilution ranges, even at the Series A, at like 10 to 15% total dilution for the round, versus in the past, historically, we've seen anything from like 20 to 25%.
Mm-hmm. That's because you can build something fast now with AI. You don't need 100 people team now. You can 5 people team can build a lot of stuff. So,
You need less cash. Yeah. And also, like, honestly, founders are aware of dilution, and they will telegraph the message like, I don't want to take on that much dilution. In the past, maybe a fund would be like, well, we're not going to get involved unless we can get our 15 to 20%. But now founders will be like, fine, then I'll move on to the next person who will accept a lower dilution from us, or lower ownership range from us. And there are plenty of funds that are willing to do that.
mm-hmm. So it's pretty competitive among funds as well.
It's an incredibly competitive market right now. Yeah.
So how should a founder choose their VC?
I think at the end of the day, venture is more like a marriage than, longer term than most marriages. And choosing the fund to work with is really a function of trust. It is, and it really depends. There are some folks who are not, especially at the seed stage, where it's less about choosing a board member. But I think overall the theme is like, pick people who are good people, who you can trust, and who will help and not hurt the business, which is surprisingly more difficult to find than you would think. Really, it's truly finding founders and firms who will add value and bring you to that next stage. The truth is, at the end of the day, it is the founder who is going to make or break the company, but firms can kind of guide, I think, and good board partners can kind of still help them along the decision-making process and make incremental changes. And sometimes those incremental changes can add up. But ultimately, it's about finding people that you can trust, that you enjoy spending time with, because you will spend so much time with the folks on your board. And this is like a lifelong partnership and journey. These relationships can often extend up to 10 years or longer. And so truly, it's about picking people that you enjoy spending time with, who you think you can add value to the business, and that you trust. It's a business that's all about trust.
Brilliant. Tell us about top 3 founder behaviors which are a green light or a red flag.
Yeah, green light, speed of execution. This one is huge for me. I think especially in the age of AI, we're seeing founders move faster than ever before. For example, I'll bring up a company of mine, Patlytics. Historically in SaaS, it's been, hey, pick a wedge into a product suite, do that wedge really well, and then move on to the next thing. If you try to do multiple things at once, the compound strategy approach, it's not going to work, because you're going to be distracted and your resources will be distracted. That was like historically the old SaaS adage. I think with AI, because you can ship and build faster than ever before, and founders are honestly like more intense and motivated than ever, you can actually do more of a compound system. And this has been very thematic across most of my investments. And so Catalytics is a company that shipped multiple modules and use cases at once versus a competition. That's something that really drew us to like the speed of execution, the intensity, the urgency that's deep within a company culture. I learned this at Uber. I'm like applying it to what I see in greatness now. And so the number one thing I look for is that like speed of execution. Two, I think the ability to hire great people and inspire them, I think is a very underrated quality in a founder. But looking at the kind of talent a founder is able to attract early on, and this is important. Like it's a very competitive job market at certain for certain roles and for certain specialties. And I think getting great engineers and inspiring them to work with you when they could be getting a huge pay package at OpenAI or Anthropic. This is always a signal to me of someone who's like a great leader and can inspire confidence within the team and like a great culture. And then the third is honestly like, this kind of goes back to the urgency thing, but there are certain founders, if I text or email them, they will respond right away, no matter what time of the hour it is. And I tend to think that's a great signal. Again, it really just ties back to that urgency, execution, etc. But I'll actually reframe that to say the last kind of green light I look for is the ability to be both a great short-term and long-term thinker. I think this is actually something that is a very difficult quality to find, because you can be an execution machine and just be really great at the short term, but miss like the long-term strategic roadmap. And so finding someone who has both a long-term vision and the short-term execution skills, like that's huge for me as a founder. So those are the top three things. I think the negatives, red lights, you might call it, are all like the inverse of what I just talked about. Like, and probably not much more to say there, but I will say like the best founders I've known are just like very chip on their shoulder, intense, driven folks, and building a business that matters to them.
Beautiful. This is very helpful. What's most important on day zero? Founder market fit, the inside idea, or evidence of product craftsmanship?
I'm going to go with the founder market fit. I really think at the early stages, it just comes down to the people. I think ideas are a dime a dozen. A great founder can pivot his or her way into a fantastic idea. And so it's funny, when I first started on my investing journey, I was all about the idea in the market. It all had to make sense to me. I was like, this is a great idea. This is a perfect market. And like intellectually, that's how I wanted to invest. I think in the 8 years that I've now spent in venture, I've really come to realize it's all about the person. So I'm going to go with team again.
So why would your website say product first? Shouldn't you say founder first?
I actually think that product is driven by the team. And so one thing I'll say too is like, I think team is most important at the early stages, but also founder first is something that is pretty obvious. Like almost every venture firm is going to be like, we're founder first. Like, okay, so that feels a little obvious. I will say, because we're on the later stages, Series A to C is when you begin to see examples of great product craftsmanship. But in my mind, that's still derivative of the founder. And there are certain founders, by the way, who are incredible executors, but maybe not as focused on product. And maybe those are the kinds of founders like our firm would get less excited about than someone who's both an execution machine, but also like loves and understands great product. And so we think they're tied together really intrinsically, but probably the way we're framing that is because we are a Series A plus firm. And that's when you can really see like the examples of great product craftsmanship come to light, versus if we were a seed firm, maybe our tagline would be founder first. At the end of the day, though, it still all comes from the person.
Absolutely. Tell us, when should founders start thinking of exiting? At what level? And then maybe VCs come in, they want to put a new CEO. When should a founder start thinking about it?
It's such a great question, and it's always a really tough one. At N47, our desire and our hope, and when we invest in every company, is the belief that every founder will take it to the very end. That's what we all want. I think several nuances to that question. When should a founder exit is largely driven often by the founders themselves. Um, Being a founder is exhausting. It takes your entire life. It takes so much out of you. I've often seen there comes a point where people get tired and they want to see an end to that journey. And I don't blame them. You sacrifice so much during this time, your family, your time, your friends. And I think, especially with companies that don't have product market fit, you can trudge on for years or you can direct your time to something else. And I think it's a very personal choice on when founders exit and not. Some people will want to have the energy and the desire to continue going. But, at the 7-8 year mark, at the 3-4 year mark, depending on where how the company is progressing, it could be a difficult decision. So I think it really comes down to the founder's personal desire. And if they feel like they can build something bigger with this, and if their time is like best spent doing this, or, if you have an acquisition offer from OpenAI, could you do better work there? So it really comes down to the founder's desire. Look, we're in an age where typically we exist in an age where it's typically a founder controlled environment and board. And again, so it's kind of like their decision on whether or not they want to keep going and if they feel like that is the best opportunity and the best way to spend their time.
There are also a lot of things are changing over the time, especially after AI. VCs have a very important role to play in the company, and sometimes they also are being blamed that they change the direction of the company, and that because they change the direction of the company was perhaps not making money, so VC just came and pushed it to change direction or pivot. So, and a founder vision has lost, and there's a perhaps a slight issue between the founder and the VCs. How do you resolve those issues? How do we move forward in case of a disconnect between founder and the VC?
This is why it's so important to select a board member that's aligned with both your long-term and short-term vision for the company. Look, I will also say, I've never been a part of anything like this, but I've obviously seen situations where founders sometimes by choice realize that they are not the best fit for the company going forward and will bring in a CEO for a different stage of growth. We actually see this quite often with companies that are preparing to go public. And sometimes they're companies where founders don't love the later stage CEO role. They like the early stages of building. And we see plenty of times where they might recognize that it's better for the business to bring in someone else. I think that's the most optimistic scenario, is when the founder is like self-aware or just like wants to do something else and is like, let's bring in someone else. I'm sure there are situations where, again, I've never been a part of anything like this, where the business may not be performing. And, even in Uber's case, there was a CEO change at some point, kind of before the company went public. Again, it's, I think, a deeply personal decision. I think it's kind of why you must choose board partners that align with your vision. And oftentimes it'll be up to the board and the partners you choose, including, the CEO themselves, because they're part of the board, to make that decision jointly. And hopefully it's a decision that can be aligned amicably. It doesn't always happen, but I will say we are living in a world where there's more founder control than ever. So it's becoming less and less of an issue in my mind.
Because of AI?
It's because, many boards are now founder controlled. And therefore it's their decision whether or not they want a new CEO or to bring in someone else.
And why it's changing? How it's changing? How can founder have more control on board?
It's totally a negotiation during term sheets, right? I'm more on the Series A stage at this moment in time, but most boards I'm on are founder control. Yeah, it's just a negotiation. And I think it is something that has changed from years past, where, preferred votes might outnumber common, but the environment has totally shifted. We're in a world where there's abundant capital and not enough great ideas. And so the power dynamic has shifted as well.
Brilliant. Why are we saying that the capital is abundant? Is abundance? We all know that. Do we lack great founders, or are we lacking great ideas?
I think that just the rate of institutionalization of venture has happened faster. There are a lot of great founders and great ideas, but just there's so much capital now. And I think it's a function of how successful technology has been over the last 10 years. And we're seeing venture capital become more institutionalized as an industry, very similar to, frankly, private equity and some other verticals. So there's just a lot of money. We're also living in a time of, like I said, all-time stock market highs, a lot of great exits. Obviously, in a bear market, like capital can compress again. But right now, we're in a situation where public markets inform private, and it's euphoric right now.
Brilliant. From first meeting to time sheet, what's your ideal cadence?
Typically, I would say as a fund, we can run down a process at the fastest in 1 to 2 weeks. That is not the way I prefer to do things. Like I said, I think choosing a board member or investor is such a big long-term decision. My personal preference is getting to know the founder way before a round happens and then running that to ground when the round kicks off, or preempting the round in a process that takes 1 to 2 weeks. Now, 1 to 2 weeks is like diligence. It's, meeting customers. It's talking to experts and really getting deep in the space. So that can happen in digging through the data room, right? That is typically a process that can take like one or 2 weeks. Hopefully we've done a lot of that pre-work in advance if we're getting to know you ahead of time. But I think the relationship building part ideally should start, anywhere from 6 months to a year before they actually raise. And it's a series of like getting to know us as a fund. It's a series of getting to know me as an investor. And so I think, again, term sheet can happen in like 1 to 2 weeks once a round kicks off. But ideally, we've gotten to know each other way ahead of time, and maybe we're even preempting the round.
Brilliant. What do you look for in the pitch deck?
Yeah, I think really it's all about a founder's storytelling ability and their clarity of thought. I am less interested in, having all the details on a pitch deck. I am more interested, I think founders who are great storytellers are great fundraisers. And I'm looking for that same clarity of thought in like long-term and short-term roadmap, but also like I want to feel excited when I look at a deck or when a founder tells me the story. So to me, it's about a chance to showcase your passion for what you're doing and like your storytelling abilities. A pitch deck should obviously have all the typical things, thesis, competitive landscape, market, et cetera, et cetera. But I would rather it be short and sweet and spend more time on the product actually. So a big part of our pitches are product demos rather than just like walk us through a deck. We like to save 30 minutes or so for a product demonstration. Really going back to our tagline of product first, like we love to see and feel the product. And then the pitch deck and the storytelling ability is kind of a part of that as well.
Is it important for, let's say, a VC fund like N47 to meet the founders in person, or
Yes.
virtual is okay? Okay.
We've done many deals where we have not met the founders in person, but typically the pitch itself, the partner presentation does not need to be in person. But hopefully the partner sponsoring the deal will have spent quite a lot of time with the founder in person. And so maybe that means I'm spending time with the founder, dinners, coffees, et cetera. And then the pitch can be remote, but we're big on in person.
Okay. Now, betting on AI and industrial tech. So we understand from your portfolio that you are investing a lot of time and money in AI companies and infra companies, apps, SaaS. Tell us what are the big winners here? Which technology are the big winners here? And what's the future looks like for investing for you for N47?
Yeah. We're B2B investors at N47, but that's up and down the stack. But each of our team members, we do specialize in certain areas. And so we divide the world into 3. We call it apps, we call it infra, and then the third is like systems. And so we've done quite a lot of hardware, software in that lens as well, but with kind of the overall focus being B2B investing. Look, we're bullish on every layer of the stack. Otherwise, we wouldn't be investing in all 3. I spend my time in the application layer primarily and some systems as well. I'm a big believer in vertical AI. I'm a big believer in what are the companies that can best take and use AI tech out there and foundation models and reproduce things in a very defensible and interesting way that is best suited, whether it's workflow wise, whether it's data, to a end user's problem set. And I think there's just so much opportunity here. So I'm quite bullish on that. We're also very bullish on systems. Hardware software has been a core thematic area of ours from the early days. We think hardware does provide a moat, like a lock-in and a way to capture data, and then you build software on top of that. And the cost of hardware and producing hardware is coming down over time. And so some of our best investments have been in this space as well. But I think there will be lots of winners across the AI wave. And I think all three verticals are going to do amazing. There's going to be opportunity in so many areas. I think, on the system side, I will highlight, Verkada and Traction as portfolio companies of ours that have embraced kind of hardware, software, and are very, utilizing the latest in vision language models and, but have kind of hardware to capture that data, and that remains a big moat of theirs. We also love that they're kind of attacking industries that are a little bit more underserved in the physical world, and we think they're incredible businesses that are going to make a huge impact there. And because I spend most of my time on apps, I'll highlight, we love these really ambitious founders that are going after systems of record for the first time in ages. And so back, then it was impossible to imagine a Salesforce killer, NetSuite killer. Many folks have tried. We're pretty excited about startups that are reimagining what a system of record can look like into what we like to call a system of action, and building AI agents on top to automate a lot of the workflows on top, which then gives them the right to potentially disrupt the ERP. And so some companies I'll highlight there are Oracell, which is competing with Salesforce, Nominal, which is building accounting agents on top of your ERP, and eventually competing with NetSuite and others. So many more. But those are just a couple of examples of areas that we like to play in.
Mhm. Do you think these smaller companies who want to displace, let's say, a Salesforce, or let's say even Comet or Perplexity is trying to displace Google, Google Chrome, is it possible, or it's like a moonshot?
I think consumer can be tougher
Hmm.
because with Perplexity and Comet, you're seeing, a lot of the new gen browsers themselves are built on Chrome's infrastructure and Chrome's open source infrastructure. So TBD, I think consumer's harder to predict. Obviously a very different market, but I do think that a lot of systems of record in B2B are just hated. Like, I don't know anyone that likes Salesforce. I don't know anyone that's happy with using NetSuite. I certainly don't know anyone that's happy with using, any of the ITSM vendors out there. So honestly, I think because these software suites are so hated by their users versus like I'm actually a pretty happy user of Chrome. I think Chrome is great. Um, Most people hate their existing systems of record. It's really funny to read some of the reviews for like NetSuite, for example, or Salesforce or whatever. And so I do think it's going to be finally up for grabs. Is it a moonshot? It's not going to be easy, but I think you can build a really valuable business by sitting on top of these ERPs and building agentic workflows as well. And that hopefully gives you the right to then go after the big prize, which is to replace the underlying system of record.
I totally agree with you. I was talking to somebody. I also saw the Salesforce demo they were using, and I like, this is Salesforce. Is this what you're paying them for? A big company, a bank, I will not naming them, is paying Salesforce about $75 million a year
Yeah.
for 90,000 accounts. $75 million a year come from the bank to Salesforce.
There's no
For
way that, some portions of this, Salesforce isn't going away by any means, but there's no way that new startups that are reimagining what a CRM should look like from the ground up, like there's no way they're not going to be able to eat away at some of the market share that Salesforce has. So I'm pretty bullish on that. I don't think it's as much of a moonshot as displacing Google Chrome.
I agree with you. We spoke about moat. You spoke on moat multiple times.
Yeah.
What's the true moat in the AI world? Is it IP? Is it the data loops? It is the money? Is the
Wow.
workflow depth? What's the true moat?
I think everyone's trying to figure it out. I don't know if anyone has a perfect answer here. It changes all the time. But for me, number one moat is still just speed of execution. That's all a startup really has. you are able to develop products faster, quicker, and please your customer more than anyone else. Then comes in the workflows. I think you have to lock in your users somehow. And that might be like you are storing their data, you're becoming their new system of record. They're using workflows that would be impossible to switch off of because of how great they are. But it's all about speed of execution. It's about continually building more and ensuring users are more locked into your ecosystem. So it all comes back to that first point. I do think the data moat is one that we really like, but it's quite early to see how that'll play out. So one of the reasons I love vertical SaaS so much is I do believe a lot of these companies are collecting a lot of very valuable data in their specific verticals. Patlytics is a great example of this. Great patent data sets. I just think it's early for these companies to use this data in a way that will create a defensible moat for now. But I'm actually very bullish on what this data can do longer term. It's just right now, the models are still getting very, very good. And I think that once the models get to a point where maybe like the improvements are more of a plateau, then you can start using this data for interesting things. But like,
Mhm.
I think it'd be a mistake for a company right now to start like investing a lot of resources in fine tuning models and things like that.
Mhm.
But I do
Is
think it's useful eventually.
IP a moat in the AI world?
Uh, Really depends on the vertical that you're in, but I would say I wouldn't really be placing a ton of value on IP as a moat. I think it's all just about speed of execution.
Mhm. So do you think OpenAI has a moat because they launched first with the speed of execution and launching new models and capturing bigger market compared to Gemini or Grok or the model by Meta?
It's interesting because I think OpenAI is a consumer play, and so I'm going to think about it from that lens. And I do think they are number one in the consumer market. It's undisputed, but you're seeing Anthropic. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the latest numbers, but their enterprise API usage has surpassed OpenAI. So I think every LLM every model provider and lab is going to carve out a specific niche for themselves. And I think you're seeing OpenAI and Anthropic start to diverge on consumer and enterprise. I actually think that at this point, anyone who is a model provider is going to do well because you are not going to build a new model from scratch anymore. The foundation model, they have raised so much capital, which is a moat, by the way. They've raised so much capital that no one else is going to be able to raise billions to train a new foundation model from scratch. It's just not happening. But I do think that it will be a world like cloud where you have multiple providers and they're going to shine at different things. I will say brand is a moat as well. And I think at this point, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, they've all established some type of moat with the brand. And I think that's going to continue to persist,
Mhm.
even if
And
models
these are
out in improvements and in capabilities.
so what is OpenAI a brand or Sam Altman a brand?
I think OpenAI is a brand. I think OpenAI will do fine without Sam Altman, actually. It's gone
Mm.
to a point where, like, even if he were gone, OpenAI will continue to persist.
Now.
Now, yeah.
Mm. As a VC, how much of AI do you use personally to shortlist the startups and do due diligence? What kind of AI are you using as a VC?
Oh, yeah. That's a great question. A ton. We actually have a head of data within our company that is constantly building out new things for us to try, whether it's automating our memos, our decks, our research. We have email drafting tools. We have deep research. We have all kinds of things. We have triggers when certain events happen, and so we're really trying to think about our firm as AI first as well, and we're trying everything.
So you're building or you're using existing tools?
A combination of both.
Okay. Okay. In your website, you wrote an article about the last mile work is going away.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
if you can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So a core thesis of ours is around, I think in this first wave of AI, the work that can be easily automated are the tasks that are quite manual and that no one wants to do. I'm not talking about like higher order thinking by any means, but things like scheduling, transcription, I can think of all kinds of things like accounting, manual workflows and tasks. And I think for a lot of different industries, things that humans used to have to do by eye, by hand, by paper. Like, we have a great company called Two Dots that's automating the underwriting process, and like used to have teams of people poring over your bank statements, your ID, you're piecing together different pieces of information. I think for these like very rote tasks, AI is just perfect at like document understanding, um, making decisions based on a little bit more deterministic rules. And so I think for these like last mile tasks, there's a lot of automation that will happen in a lot of these industries. And we're seeing it in healthcare and legal, accounting, just all of this manual work that humans have to do. I think there are tasks that have a clear like right or wrong, and then there are more deterministic in nature. I think those are harder to solve for than say tasks that you revise a contract but have a human eye look it over. But either way, there's no doubt that a lot of manual steps alongside these processes are being eliminated.
And what's going to happen to the jobs? Because one of your articles mentioned that roughly we're going to be losing about 300 million jobs to AI perhaps in the next few years. And then if our founders will need less and less people also to do these jobs, they'll require less and less capital as well to do this job. What will happen to the VC money? Are you going to invest beyond founders? You're going to go to markets? You're going to go to real estate? What will happen to the extra capital that you have raised?
I actually don't think there will be a shortage of companies doing things. So I'm not worried about our money going elsewhere. I think we're seeing just a proliferation of great AI companies being started. But I do think I am worried about the job replacement that is happening as we speak. A lot of the startups I've talked to or invested in, like you are seeing teams of front and back office people reduce. The truth is, these jobs were always difficult to hire for. Let's talk about someone who's doing scheduling at a doctor's office. Like, manual, should a human be doing it? It's not a great job for a human to be doing, but there is no doubt that there will be impact in the job market. I do worry about the second order effects of this. And I know people have floated different things like UBI and like, how can the government step in to support folks? My hope is that AI will create more jobs than it displaces, and there will be people doing other things. For example, we're seeing the rise of human annotators and like data labelers, and like you'll see new jobs being created. But if I'm being honest, it is something that worries me. The optimist in me would like to believe that this will create more productivity and more jobs and lead people to be doing other higher order tasks. But the truth is, I don't think any of us really know what's going to happen. And the short term could look really ugly. So I am concerned about that.
Perfectly said. And people are going to lose jobs on one hand, and new jobs are being created by AI as well. And it's not certain the people who are losing jobs will get the new jobs. There's no certainty on it.
There is value being created, but it might be for like the business owner, the equity owner, et cetera. And so I think that is something that as a society, we're going to have to think quite a bit about.
Let's do the last rapid fire questions. Cold email subject line that gets your attention.
Usually it's something very personalized, like obsessed with accounting agents, let's chat. Or if it's to someone that used to work at Uber, hi from another ex-Uber, like would love to chat and learn more. So something that's very personalized, but short and sweet and to the point.
Deck or product video first?
Probably because I just don't have a lot of time, I do like to look at the deck first.
Okay.
Just as a quick like pass. Is this a good fit or not? Yeah.
Favorite diligence question right now?
What are you doing that is difficult to replicate, and what will be difficult for others to do?
One last question. One founder superpower you wish you had more teams had?
Goes back to speed of execution and like long and short-term vision. The marriage of both is perfect. I think very, very difficult to nail both.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Vivian. Thank you for your beautiful answers and being so authentic and transparent. Looking forward to being in touch, and thank you for sharing the wisdom with our viewers today.
It was a pleasure. Thanks so much, Amit. Bye.
Thanks, bye.